Hi, Suresh Surana Associates LLP Interview Preparation Guide. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most important preparation guides for Suresh Surana Associates LLP, commonly known as SSALP, for campus and off-campus interviews. Brief intro: Suresh Surana Associates LLP, SSRA, a 2,200-plus member audit tax advisory firm founded in 2013 and headquartered in Mumbai, operates across 12-plus Indian cities and actively recruits from major campuses in Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi. These questions are gathered using web search and our internal database, so use them as preparation material, but also explore other topics from our channel playlist. Timestamps are available in the description if you want to jump to a specific question. Let's begin. How would you plan an audit for a mid-size corporate client with limited internal controls? Sample answer: I begin by understanding the business, performing walkthroughs, and identifying high-risk areas. Since controls are weak, I rely more on substantive testing and expand sample sizes. I also define a clear audit plan, assign responsibilities, and schedule early discussions with management so surprises can be avoided. While answering, always include points like walkthroughs, risk identification, and increased substantive testing. End. What procedures do you follow to understand a client's business, processes, and key risks before audit? Sample answer: I review financials, industry reports, organizational charts, and process notes. I meet process owners, perform walkthroughs, and document key risks. Understanding the business helps me focus on areas with the highest possibility of misstatement. While answering, always include points like reviewing financials, performing walkthroughs, and mapping risks. How do you determine and apply materiality for statutory audits of SME and mid-size companies? Sample answer: I select a benchmark like revenue, profit, or net assets depending on the business model. I apply a percentage, adjust for qualitative risks, and then set performance materiality. For SMEs, I also consider owner-driven decisions that may impact materiality thresholds. While answering, always include points like benchmark selection, qualitative factors, and performance materiality. What steps would you take to evaluate the reliability of management-provided schedules? Sample answer: I check whether schedules match the ledger, whether formulas work correctly, and whether supporting documents exist. If the preparer lacks competence or the schedule has errors, I increase testing and apply more skepticism. While answering, always include points like tie-back testing, formula checks, and supporting document review. How do you perform substantive testing for revenue when the client uses basic ERP or manual systems? Sample answer: I vouch invoices, dispatch documents, and payment records. I test cutoff, verify pricing, and match entries with supporting evidence. Manual systems require heavier reliance on evidence because system controls are weaker. While answering, always include points like invoice vouching, dispatch matching, and cutoff testing. What procedures do you follow to ensure correct audit sampling in small and mid-sized audits? Sample answer: I consider risk, materiality, population size, and diversity of transactions. I choose random or judgmental sampling based on the nature of the account. Higher risk areas require larger and more targeted samples. While answering, always include points like risk-based sampling, population evaluation, and judgmental selection. How do you verify accounts receivable balances when confirmations are not received? Sample answer: I use alternate procedures like checking subsequent collections, reviewing customer statements, and matching invoices with dispatch records. I also evaluate whether non-response indicates any credit risk concerns. While answering, always include points like alternate evidence, subsequent receipt testing, and ledger reconciliation. What steps do you take if there is a mismatch in bank reconciliation prepared by the client? Sample answer. I compare the reconciliation with actual bank statements, verify outstanding checks and deposits, and check reconciling items for validity. Any unusual or stale items require immediate investigation. While answering, always include points like verifying reconciling items, matching statements, and checking clearance. How would you audit inventory for a client with multiple storage locations? Sample answer. I attend stock counts at all major locations or rotate visits. I perform test counts, verify stock transfers, and reconcile physical quantities with the books. I also check whether controls differ across locations. While answering, always include points like attending counts, verifying transfers, and reconciling records. What checks do you perform to identify slow-moving or obsolete inventory? Sample answer. I analyze aging reports, sales trends, and production cycles. I check whether items have been idle for long periods or have become outdated. Obsolete items may require write-downs. While answering, always include points like aging analysis, movement review, and write-down assessment. How do you perform expense vouching and identify fictitious expenses? Sample answer. I verify bills, approvals, vendor authenticity, and payment evidence. I pay attention to round amounts, repeated vendors, and unusual dates. Any inconsistency is cross-verify with supporting documents. While answering, always include points like bill checking, vendor verification, and payment tracing. What procedures do you follow to audit GST compliance, including ITC and outward supplies? Sample answer. I reconcile GSTR2B with purchase registers, validate eligibility of ITC, and check whether outward supplies match GSTR1 and financials. I also verify that taxes are deposited on time. While answering, always include points like 2B reconciliation, outward supply matching, and ITC eligibility. How do you evaluate internal controls when formal documentation is lacking? Sample answer. I rely on walkthroughs, discussions, and observation of day-to-day operations. I identify control gaps and assess how much reliance I can place. Weak documentation means I increase substantive work. While answering, always include points like observation, walkthroughs, and increased substantive testing. What would you do if the client does not provide complete documentation for major transactions? Sample answer. I re-request the evidence, review alternate proof such as emails or bank entries, and escalate if gaps remain. If documentation cannot be obtained, I consider the impact on the audit opinion. While answering, always include points like alternate evidence, escalation, and impact assessment. How do you audit fixed asset capitalization and repair versus capital expenditure classification? Sample answer. I check invoices, inspect assets, and evaluate the nature of expenditure. If the spending increases life or capacity, it is capital. If it only maintains condition, it is revenue. Misclassification affects profit and asset base. While answering, always include points like invoice review, physical inspection, and classification logic. What checks do you perform to verify depreciation calculation under Schedule 2? Sample answer. I verify useful lives, check calculation formulas, ensure additions and disposals are accounted correctly, and validate method consistency. I also ensure depreciation aligns with Companies Act requirements. While answering, always include points like useful life review, calculation testing, and compliance. How do you audit contingent liabilities and ongoing litigations? Sample answer. I obtain legal letters, review management explanations, evaluate probability of loss, and verify disclosures. I also check historical settlement patterns to judge realism of estimates. While answering, always include points like legal confirmations, probability assessment, and disclosure review. that. What procedures do you use to test related party transactions and disclosures? Sample answer: I examine agreements, check board approvals, review ledger trails, and ensure disclosures match statutory requirements. I also test whether pricing is reasonable and not manipulated. While answering, always include points like approval checks, agreement review, and disclosure testing. How would you verify loans and advances given to group entities or directors? Sample answer: I check Companies Act compliance, loan agreements, interest terms, and board approval. I also test recoverability and disclosure accuracy. While answering, always include points like approvals, agreement review, and law compliance. What steps would you take to audit a company with significant cash transactions? Sample answer: cash receipts and payments thoroughly, perform surprise cash counts, and check supporting evidence carefully. Cash-based businesses carry higher fraud risk, so skepticism is essential. While answering, always include points like vouching cash flows, surprise counts, and fraud-focused testing. How do you test revenue cutoff around the year-end for trading manufacturing entities? Sample answer: I verify sales recorded just before and just after year-end by checking dispatch documents, delivery notes, and invoices. I ensure that revenue is recognized only when control transfers to the customer. If dispatch is post-year-end, revenue must be deferred. While answering, always include points like dispatch verification, invoice timing, and transfer of control checks. What procedures do you follow to audit provisions and accruals at year-end? Sample answer: I check unbilled expenses, review subsequent invoices, and evaluate historical patterns. I also verify supporting documentation, contracts, and approval trails. The goal is to ensure expenses belong to the correct period. While answering, always include points like unbilled review, subsequent invoices, and proper period recognition. How do you perform analytical reviews to identify unusual fluctuations in financial statements? Sample answer: I compare ratios, trends, and monthly movements with prior periods. Any abnormal spike or drop is analyzed through discussions with management and verification with supporting documents. While answering, always include points like ratio analysis, trend review, and variance explanation. What steps would you take to test compliance with Companies Act requirements for private limited companies? Sample answer: I check board meetings, statutory registers, share capital compliance, auditor appointments, and related party disclosures. I ensure filings with MCA are completed timely and accurately. While answering, always include points like statutory register review, MCA filings, and RPT compliance. How do you audit statutory dues like PF, ESI, PT, or TDS in small businesses? Sample answer: I verify challans, review payroll registers, match deductions with payments, and ensure timely filing. Any delayed payment requires interest or penalty review. While answering, always include points like challan verification, deduction matching, and timely compliance. What procedures do you follow for tax audit working papers and 44AB reporting? Sample answer: I check turnover, expense classifications, depreciation, related parties, and compliance-related clauses. I prepare clause-wise working papers with supporting documentation, ensuring accuracy before uploading. While answering, always include points like clause analysis, supporting documentation, and accurate reporting. How do you audit businesses that rely heavily on Excel-based bookkeeping? Sample answer: I check formula integrity, trace entries to source documents, and review internal checks like password protection or version control. Since Excel is prone to error, I expand substantive sampling. While answering, always include points like formula testing, source verification, and increased sampling. What steps do you take to evaluate valuation workings prepared for mergers, acquisitions, or funding? Sample answer. I checked assumptions, discount rates, cash flows, comparables, and sensitivity analyses. I evaluate whether the data used is accurate and whether the model is consistent with valuation principles. While answering, always include points like assumption testing, cash flow validation, and sensitivity review. How do you audit share capital, share premium, and compliance with Section 4262? Sample answer. I verify board and shareholder approvals, valuation reports, ROC filings, and allotment registers. I check whether funds were received before allotment and ensure correct disclosure. While answering, always include points like approval checking, ROC compliance, and allotment verification. What procedures do you follow to test inventory existence using physical verification methods? Sample answer. I attend physical counts, perform test counts, check tags and bin cards, and reconcile physical sheets with book quantities. Any mismatch is investigated with store records. While answering, always include points like attending counts, sampling, and reconciliation. How do you review board meeting minutes for audit-relevant matters? Sample answer. I look for approvals related to loans, investments, contracts, related party transactions, and litigation. Minutes often reveal decisions that affect financial reporting. While answering, always include points like key approvals, financial impacts, and compliance review. What checks do you perform on vendor and customer master data for accuracy? Sample answer. I verify KYC, GST details, bank information, and approval workflows. Incorrect master data can cause misstatements, so I evaluate change controls as well. While answering, always include points like KYC verification, approval checks, and change control. How do you ensure GST reconciliation between GSTR 2B, GSTR 3B, and books? Sample answer. I match ITC from 2B with purchase registers, compare outward supplies with 3B and books, and highlight differences for rectification. Reconciliation ensures both compliance and accuracy. While answering, always include points like matching 2B, checking 3B, and reconciling with books. What steps would you take to audit foreign remittances and FEMA compliance? Sample answer. I verify purpose codes, bank FIRC documents, Form 15CA, CB, and limits prescribed under FEMA. Any non-compliance requires reporting and discussion with management. While answering, always include points like FIRC verification, FEMA limits, and documentation review. How do you audit investment portfolios held by small family-run businesses or HNIs? Sample answer. I confirm holdings, check broker statements, verify FIFO or weighted average valuation, and reconcile interest dividend income. I also check for long-term versus short-term classification. While answering, always include points like confirmations, valuation method, and income reconciliation. What procedures do you perform to evaluate effectiveness of internal audit reports? Sample answer. I review coverage, quality of findings, follow-up mechanisms, and management responses. Effective internal audit strengthens reliance on controls and reduces substantive work. While answering, always include points like coverage review, follow-up assessment, and impact evaluation. How would you handle disagreements with management regarding proposed audit adjustments? Sample answer. I explain the accounting requirement clearly, show evidence, and document discussions. If disagreement continues, I escalate to partners and consider the impact on the opinion. While answering, always include points like evidence explanation, escalation, and opinion impact. What steps do you follow to prepare audit documentation for peer review or quality checks? Sample answer. I ensure working papers are cross-referenced, properly indexed, signed, and supported with evidence. Documentation should clearly show what was tested and what conclusions were drawn. While answering, always include points like indexing, cross-referencing, and evidence completeness. End quote. How do you identify potential fraud indicators in small companies with weak controls? Sample answer. I look for unusual journal entries, missing documents, cash-heavy transactions, related party dealings, and lifestyle mismatches. In such environments, professional skepticism is essential. While answering, always include points like unusual entries, missing documentation, and skepticism. How would you communicate audit observations to clients in a structured and professional manner? Sample answer. I prepare a clean discussion note with observation, impact, root cause, and recommendation. I share it politely in meetings, ensuring management understands both the issue and the corrective path. While answering, always include points like structured reporting, clarity, and professional tone. Thank you for watching, and if you liked our video, kindly press the like button and leave us a comment. This will help us reach a wider audience. Don't forget to check the playlist for more great learning.